Okay, good morning, friends, warrior sages. What a splendid day we have today. I have a very special guest and friend and brother, a man of great influence in my life and my family's life. This is Mr. Kevin Nations. Thanks for being here today, Kevin. Let me give a little background, and then I'd love you to make an introduction of yourself. Um, Kevin and I met. I was recommended by a friend to go visit Kevin to hear about his trainings and such. And at that time, I was running a very large human potential company, giving close to 100 live seminars around the world with my team. We were rocking it, rock stars all over the world, flying all over. But what was happening was I was spending so much time away from home that I was doing the, if you will, the default of many entrepreneurs, which is working my buns off, but not really putting attention and love on my family and taking care of the home base and ground. And so when I came to you and you shared about your event, Big Money from Small Events, it was the opposite of my philosophy, which is big events for small money using that particular paradigm or frame. But really, as I got into it, what I really realized was that you were about living a life of depth of equilibrium. And you talk about the F's. I'd love you to share about. But welcome so much, and I'm very grateful for all the great wisdom and the ability that you've helped me and many, many others for many years to come down to the essence of what their service is and have great value. And in this time, I think this means so much. So thanks for being here today, Kevin.
Satyan, it's so great to be here with you. And I'm excited to share with all of the people who follow you. Certainly, there are, I would imagine, more quantity of people that follow you than I even have a chance to reach directly. And that's been something that I've been privileged to do for about 17 years now, is just work with a small group of people, but that collectively they influence, I don't even know how many people, collectively. And that privilege of providing service as a servant to true leaders like yourself and others who, who I've had the good fortune to work with. I think a lot of people, as they become people of influence, say that they want to influence a lot of other people. And you can do that directly, or, as I've chosen to, you can do that indirectly. And it really is a point of service, because there are so many points of service that you've offered, can offer, do offer, and will continue to, that are far beyond the scope of, what I could do directly. And but by not trying to step into the role of everyone that are able to influence in a small degree or larger degree, you can have that. So I just wanted, as you were making that statement, I just wanted to give this as a point of encouragement sometimes to those of you who may be watching, who may in some ways have your ego challenged, or even have your calling questioned by you, as to whether or not you're being of influence. Don't forget the secondary and tertiary and on and on and on benefits of you providing leadership to people who then go and influence a ton of others. It could be super beneficial.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. I'd love to ask you, you've come from a very unique background before you got into business. Can you share a little bit about your history of how you got into business and what your inspiration for, if you will, evolved, conscious, servant-oriented business came from?
Well, as you, Satya, know, some of you may that know my history, and some of you may not. I grew up in a very fundamental Christian religion, and but with and within that religion, not but within that religion, but and within that religion, though, I saw two types of leaders evolve, and I think that is true no matter where that leadership is, whether it's in religion or politics or personal development or business leadership and growth. But I saw that often, not always, but often, the leadership that was most visible, in my opinion, getting the opportunity to see behind the scenes of the impact that those people, the deep impact those people made, the leadership that was most visible to me was, as I began to observe those people closely, was people that I had less and less desire to be about, even as 5, 6, 7 years old. And the people that I saw that many times were less visible were having a greater impact on their communities than, others who traveled and did conferences, et cetera. So as I moved into business, I went into the Navy and learned quite a bit about preparation. Spent several years, probably over a year, literally, collectively under, hundreds and hundreds of feet under the water on a submarine. And so I learned the benefits of preparation there and how being prepared for even the most, minute possibilities of challenges coming forward was, in my experience, more beneficial and profitable than to presume that everything was going to be super positive and then, be dismayed when challenges come. Challenges will come in your life, and that's not a pessimistic view. They may come infrequently, and you may have a very blessed life and have challenges come infrequently. But I have probably a very ineloquent way of saying this, is that, you don't really know the value of your leader until you hit what I call a shit hits the fan moment. And that's when you know if you're following a leader, because just about anybody can react when there's no resistance and you can follow a GPS that's been carefully followed. But when all of that is thrown away and people have to follow their spirit guide, their intuition, their preparation, the combination of all three of those and many more, then you get to have some sort of observation as to what kind of metal your leader, the one you've chosen to follow, the one you've chosen to be, is made of. And so a lot of the history, I think, is that as I observed, and one of the leaders that I really, really, really admired was my grandfather. And he had retired as a coal miner and then as a union negotiator for the coal miners union. And after retirement, on his own funds, he started a church in a really, really small coal mining community. It never grew to be really large, but I saw the impact and the respect that he had going door to door and dealing with people who were, obviously very churchy and Christian, and people who were exactly at the opposite extreme. And I saw him show that same, respect and love and appreciation for his fellow human. And I thought to myself, obviously, at that time in the context of Christianity, that this, in my opinion, as I read the story of Christ's actual existence in the world, this is what I think Christ would be, more than the eloquent, celebrity people who were promulgating that message. Someone who was of the people, by the people, for the people, and stood for the elevation of his community. And probably about 10 years old, that's when I decided, I didn't know I'd be in sales. I didn't know what kind of leader I'd be, or even if I'd be a leader. But if I had a chance to lead people, that I wanted to be more like my grandfather than the people who I had observed, who publicly had a very celebrity status, but privately, much of the time, this is an indictment on them as a whole, but much of the time were far less impacting to, just the average everyday person than my own granddad was. So he was a huge influence on my life and on the level of servanthood that I decided to take on, not as a denigration of myself, but I considered an elevation of oneself. Jesus Christ actually said, the greatest of you will be a servant. So I think that's a high calling.
Wow, beautiful. We're in this very unique time, of course, right now. There's many people in business. Many people are losing their businesses based on what's going on. Some people are thriving during business. The nature of business, the ethic of business, the morality of business, and how we're run is all being questioned right now for good reasons. Could you share about your space, what's your feeling around the nature, the direction, the ethic of business as we move forward into a society that's transforming and evolving?
Well, actually, I had the privilege of sharing this on a private call just a few days ago with some of your really, close proteges, mentees, whatever someone would call them. And I think it's very true right now, is that when business is great, people need a prince to party with, in times of celebration. And in times of war, people need a gladiator to depend on. And gladiators typically eschew the fancy clothing. And it's not saying that if you want to be a servant leader, you can't wear nice clothes, but typically they eschew the things that are party attire, and so they're much less celebrity. Back to that original statement, my grandfather was a gladiator in a tall community, standing for what he felt was people's spiritual elevation. And in his own way, I think that it was very true. And so whatever you're doing, whether you're actually selling even retail goods, or whether you have a professional service right now, we're all serving people and helping people feel. Everything that we sell is to help people feel more empowered and better about themselves, whether it's lawn maintenance, whether it's spiritual coaching, whether it's blue jeans, whether it's a vehicle. Everything we sell is to help people feel either less disempowered or more empowered. We're trying to elevate people up the power structure. And, they say there are 3 temptations of man, which are actually the 3 aspirations of mankind, whether you're pursuing them from a place of darkness and humanity, or a place of light and divinity. And those are money, sex, and power. But if you look at money and sexuality, those are actually just gateways to power. Everything is about either being more empowered within ourselves or escaping some sort of slavery or prison to our own thoughts and minds or to other people. So when we move into like a moment like we are now, many times in good times, and I talk about, sales and business being a combination of humanity and divinity. And when I say humanity, I don't mean like we as humans are all human. We're not. We're a combination of our own humanity and divinity. And, humanity is typically the dark side of the yin yang, and divinity is the lightness thereof. And without one, the other can't exist. And so when times are good, the alternative to love or light is greed. And many people have difficulty making that choice, because in the short term, at times the pursuit of greed is actually more short-term fulfilling than the commitment to love. But divinity is a lot more solid and stable. In just about every faith, the God or gods that are celebrated are all powerful and all knowing and ever present and present everywhere. And if there's a space where there is a multitude of gods, then the collective of them is that thing, right? And but when you move to times of resistance and struggle, then the alternative to love and that consistent experience is fear. And that's something that people typically, unless they are, self punitive, people are typically wanting to escape that fear and move to love. And a difference also in business is that happens is that typically when the alternative is greed and love, greed is a pursuit of things, and typically experiencing fear is an escape from things. Yes. So greed, you know what you want. I want that woman. I want that gold bar. I want that new car. I want that $1 million business. But fear is, I don't want to wake up, feeling disempowered anymore. And I think many people are still at the present caught in the promotion of what the alternative is. And to a great degree, the market is much less concerned with what the alternative is than the confidence that they can escape the present reality.
So these motives within us, all of us, we all have it. The way I like to see it and feel it is that we can have the opportunity to listen to what motive, be aware of the motives within us, and then direct ourselves accordingly. The ones that are based in ego, that are based in greed, that are based in temporary fulfillment, they always, if we look at it, they always tend to backfire in some way or another. And yet we can't see that backfiring in front of us when that desire is so strong, that lust, that want, that grabbing energy. And yet we have to calm down during these times and recognize that there will be a force that returns to us, that knocks us off and knocks us on our ass when we pursue ourselves from these lower motives. but to maintain and to stabilize in a state of being where actual love and true service through true devotion and care, as you said, in the upliftment of the power struggle and the power units of our clients becomes the devotion, then we're stable. Like we're actually creating long-term fulfillment, long-term happiness, long-term success in a way that magnifies rather than comes crashing back somewhere along the line. It always does. This is ancient wisdom. So where is that bridge right now? Where's that bridge we can make as business right now? How do we sense when we're in either one? How do we control that subtle force within us that drags us down?
In a recent 4 years ago in the US, Donald Trump was elected president. And then 8 years before that, Obama was elected president. And both of those promoted a change platform to some degree. Obama, yes, we can. Trump, make America great again. The converse of both of those was that things weren't perfect, right? Yes, we can submits that at some point people believe, no, we can't. Because without a no, we can't, who would be able to polarize an audience toward yes, we can, if there were some people who had been believing, no, we can't. And for Trump, this is in no way political, just talking about the promotion of change. For Trump, if there weren't people who believed that their lives were already at a maximum level of fulfillment, then why would they have wanted to make America great again? They were aspiring for, a time that was disempowering for many, but very, empowering for some to revert back to a state where people like them had been empowered. And I say that because I think that one of the things you asked what we can do right now, I think that a lot of people are aspiring to make business great again, to steal from 2015 leading up to the 2016 election. And what they're wanting to do is to go back to a time when greed abounds and the pursuit of greed is beneficial. And I think that, and as you said, things tend to cycle when we deal with our base human needs. And sometimes our base human needs in the short term can provide some very fulfilling moments of indulgence of our lust. You use that word. I mean, it can be very fulfilling. Anyone who says that in the peaks that the indulgence of one's lust doesn't have feedback doesn't understand history at all, right? And so I think that many people are looking for, some, I don't know how many, but some may be looking for, well, I've seen evidence of it, are looking for a way to move out of fear and back to the state where greed is the feedback of greed and the satiation of greed is the benefit. And, while that might have a higher momentary peak, it also follows us, it's very much a cyclical waveform. And so you're going to move from greed to fear. What's going to happen? Back to greed, then back to fear. And, in the Christian faith, Jesus Christ said one time, I'm the same yesterday, today, forever. And I think that's that's a powerful statement from somebody who lives in love. One of the Christian apostles, and I use all these Christian terms not because I'm trying to promote that over the other, it's just my history. For those of you who come from some other spiritual religious history, go back to your ancestral leaders who probably said very similar things, because the core tenet of divinity is stability. Paul said, he was an apostle of Christ, I know how to abase and I know how to be abound. I know how to abound. I know how to be abased, that's in the Shakespearean version of the Bible. Which means I know how to endure good times and I know how to experience those without getting too caught up in my ego. And I know how to experience bad times without getting too caught up in my fear, to paraphrase. But because there's some inner stability. And I think that one of the things, and it's actually better if we can do this during a moment when the alternative is positive, when we can learn to ground ourselves when greed is the alternative, then that carries through. But since we're at a point where fear is prevalent, rather than reminiscing for a time when greed can be pursued, I think it's a perfect time for people to start asking themselves, what are the things that are stable and consistent in my life? And how can I anchor my fulfillment more to those things than to things which are inherently throughout history cyclical, and they're going to like over satisfy, over satiate, and then under satisfy in pretty predictable cycles. So it's a great time to just go to what's truly important in your life, I think. And any time is, but now is especially, since fear is the alternative, to ask yourself, like, what really satisfies me, and what at my core satisfies me, and what can I do to have more of it?
Oh, oh, beautiful. In our work with entrepreneurs, business leaders, I'm seeing in my circles a great tenderness, a vulnerability for whatever is next, a new way of operating, a new way of living, a new way of relating with business, a new way of relating with wealth. And I'd love to get your sense from the folks that you've been working with. What's your sense that's going on a psychological, spiritual dimension with entrepreneurs, and how and where are we going? What's our direction with that?
I hate to be like have a single principle that I'm referring everything back to, but as you know, Satya, I have a really simple mind. Um, and I think that it's difficult to have compassion for someone who experiences the excesses of greed and then burns out. Because you're like, hey, MFer, you brought it on yourself. Should have known better. You got the Lamborghini, you got the, fancy over leveraged yacht. You got this, you got that, and you got to experience that for a couple of years while, I was being stable, and then you burned out. So on an individual basis. But now collectively, the alternative is fear. And when people are fearful, I just think in our innate human nature, it's more natural to have compassion for a collective who is experiencing the negative impacts of fear than it's easier to do that than it is to have compassion for the individuals as they start to individually experience the burnout of greed.
Yes.
I just think that's, in our, regardless of any other alternative programming, I think that we are typically more compassionate when we see things happen in a collective than when we see things happen on an individual basis, because it's a lot more difficult to assign individual responsibility, although I still see that it's there. But even though I see that it's there, the people who are fearful now are a part of, or more fearful, are a part of that cycle, and they have been driven by greed likely, and they've gone up and down. But still, when people go in a collective, even I, knowing the distinction and knowing that's probably a result of choices, it's easier to be compassionate on the collective when the collective is experiencing that. And I think that people who are living with a greater sense of weight in their humanity, they themselves are more tender toward moving toward love, because it's a lot, as I stated, people don't know when they're in fear what they want to move toward. They just know what they want to move away from. So a great sense of the collective, some are like anchoring for that. Let's make business great again. Let's make this great again, and moving back toward greed. And you see that, and I don't want to really start a political conversation, but you see that in people saying, pay us a lot for doing nothing. I don't want to go back to work. Like that's a lesser desire than let's find a way to all be contributing, and let's all be taking in some way. And there are lots of other lesser desires on the other side of the coin. So I don't want to isolate that. But when people can look and say, how can we have a responsible collective thought that doesn't denigrate the other, where it's denigrating the successful or denigrating those who are less successful? How can we have a thought that elevates both our position and elevates the opportunity for others to benefit for their position? That's where love comes in. Love is aware of consequences, but love doesn't assign judgment.
Mm, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. When I first met you, you were sharing very deeply about the freedoms, the F's. And when I came to you, I had looked at that and I said, and you'll share more about the F's, but I looked at my life and the life of many entrepreneurs that I'm in with. And we see there's great imbalance, the great tendency towards great business capacity, putting lots of time and effort and energy. Of course, it's a creation, it's a child, it's something that we want to be able to bring into the world and grow and strengthen and magnify and do well with. And yet, many of us entrepreneurs get way out of balance. We lose our health, we lose our grounding, we distance ourselves from our families, our fitness erodes, there's overwhelm, stress, struggle, anxiety, all these type of things. And then you shared about the F. So would you be able to go in that? Because applying that has been such a foundational piece in my life. And it's not this boring sense of balance. It's so much more deeper than that.
Well, yeah, I spent time in the Navy, was around, all types of, uh, special forces guys in the military and everything that were around the submarines, and everybody's all tatted up. I have one tattoo, and it's basically the four F's woven together. And you guys might could see that a F and F and F and F, two fours. And the weave is important. The fabric of life is important. So I guess that's the overriding F, is that the four F's are a fabric. And let me tell you, if you want to do something with a piece of fabric, it's so much easier if you wanted to influence the benefit of one of the threads in that fabric, just to pull it out and go do what you will with it. Much easier to work on your fitness when you don't have to make a living and be a good father, be a good mother. You can just like hit that meal plan every day, go to the gym every day. It's much easier to make money when you don't have to worry about, calling your kids at the end of the afternoon. It's much easier to operate likely on any one of those than the collective. But have you ever tried to weave a thread back into your suit when it got pulled out? The challenge is when you get to the pinnacle, and he didn't talk too much about balance, but the late great Stephen Covey said many people get to the very top of the ladder of life and find out it was leaning against the building they didn't want to be on top of. And, in much the same way, when you get all of that, money is a lot in entrepreneurship. Then you ask yourself, at what expense to my fitness? So I'll go through those. The four F's are faith, family, fitness, and finance. And they might be a bit more encompassing than one might believe. I don't mean in your faith, are you, Buddhist or Hindu or Baptist or atheist or anything. It's not about the particular name brand. I use that hopefully not irreverently, but I think that, whatever history or whatever pursuit that we found for the pathway to our own faith, then I'm all in support of that. Because I think if it brings you, like the core of faith is to bring you to a inward directed and outward directed love, because that's the stability. So if your faith does that and your faith promotes, the elevation of that versus the subjugation of that to orthodoxies, I'm for it, whatever that is, because I think that faith is the promulgation of love, both directed inward and also outward. So faith is being able to know or feel or aspire to tell oneself the truth about where one is and make choices accordingly and say, is where I'm at now, is it the best serving to myself and also to those that are around me? And that's the foundation, that's the depth of the foundation. If you don't have that, if you get successful and you don't have self-love, you're going to find some way to sabotage. And we've seen many people do this. They build these big companies, and then, they'll use cocaine or indulgent spending or prostitutes or whatever as a way to allegedly bring them more happiness, but to perhaps subconsciously bring about the destruction of the edifice that they built, that is their life, that they're afraid that their foundation isn't there to support it, and maybe rightly so. And our family is like the breadth of that foundation, and the family extends far beyond people who would share your DNA on like 21andMe, but it's your vendors, your clients, like Satya, and I consider you and Suzanne and your natural family my family.
Absolutely.
And have that same love and appreciation and want to see you guys success, and I'm happy when you are winning, and sad and wanting to be helpful if you at moments weren't. And I've shared, moments of celebration and moments of consternation and struggle with you, even recently, on both sides. So our family is all of those things, and those indicate like the breadth of our foundation. Where can we build when we, go into the streets? Is there a store that we have to avoid because we've created such a breach with that store owner that we can't even walk past that store? We go to, events when we're in the marketplace. Do we have to avoid people who we've created enmity with? That's a challenge. And so bridge those things as much as possible, so that you can have the breadth of your foundation, and hopefully as many people as possible either accept and tolerate your success or promote it. And you haven't yourself, that you haven't through your own actions done anything that's had somebody want to see you not succeed. And then fitness is basically a lot better than a great butt and good abs and some good biceps. But it's like there's basically three, I think, questions one can ask with regard to fitness. And that's with any possession that's in your life or any use of time. Is it a fit? And so many people are trying to make things more fit for their lives that isn't a fit. And I talked with one of my friends just an hour or so ago about wanting to get rid of a lot of things that I own, physical things, because I said, I'm having to have somebody come in and organize those things. And I'm paying somebody to organize things that I don't even know that I want. So it'd be better organized by just sending them to Goodwill. So if it's not a fit, get rid of it. Look around your life and see what's not a fit. Is there a car that needs to just be sold as a loss just to get it off of your driveway? Is there time that you're spending doing certain things that needs to just be done away with? Not delegated, done away with. If it's a fit, is it fit? So, that closet that has those few remaining clothes that are a fit, is it organized in a way you can get to them? Your books, your financial and fiscal records, are they easily audited? Do you know where every dollar is going? Your time, do you know where it's being spent? Is it a fit? Is it fit? And then the third one is, if it's neither, get rid of it. If it's a fit, but it's not fit, bring it into fitness. I think the one where people make the biggest mistake, though, Satyan, is when they have elements of their life that are both a fit and they are fit. They tend to forget about those things, and instead of celebrating and honoring those, they keep working on what's broken.
Yes.
And I think the biggest thing that we miss in an opportunity in our lives is when something is both a fit, it should be there, and it's fit, we've spent time and worked on it and made it powerful, then to spend time celebrating that, so that if it's, whatever it is, we can be aware, or if it's a relationship with someone else, we can together collectively be aware of how beneficial it is. So there's fitness. And then finally, finances. I think when you have the rest of those in order, I think the biggest lack that people have in their finances is that they don't trust their foundation, the depth of it. They have areas of their foundation that are crumbling because they've, failed to shore up the relationships that need to be cleaned up, shored up, done whatever. And they have a collective of things in their life that own them, or experiences or scheduling items that are neither a fit, or if they are a fit, they're not designed for fitness. And so they look at all these things, they're like, well, where's the money going to go to anyway? I don't really honor my life. And the way to attract more money, I feel, is to look at yourself as the best steward possible for the money that you would be getting. And if you trust yourself to that degree, I think it gives you a strong foundation to invite more, because you're like, I would do great things with this. I would invest this powerfully. I would, donate this powerfully. And I think that's that is the great foundation for, then you can do the tactics. I actually think the tactics of, do I sell 14 things for $1,000 or 1,000 things for $14? I think that's the easiest conversations to have. The more difficult ones are when people look at themselves and say, I don't deserve this money. And many times they're right, but it's so easily cleaned up.
Absolutely. I've seen in my work for my own life and all those that I get to work with, the application of having a strong weave of these F's, faith, family, finance, and fitness, creates a holistic life of well-being. And it pulls us out of the propensity of overwhelm and struggle. And also makes us sober. It brings us into a wholesome sobriety where we're getting to see the spectrum of our reality, but from a calmness And we're not just saying, hey, this is the one way that I need to push, 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 and then reactively doing well here and say, okay, now I need to catch up here. Now I need to catch up here. And that scrambling is a very inherent part of many entrepreneurs' mindset and default. And this takes us into another very powerful distinction that you share and teach, and that's going from mule to magician, which has been very powerful vision and imprint for me. Can you share about that?
Well, I think that many of us in business right now are either children or grandchildren of the depression era mentality that went through the U.S. You know, in the late 20s and early 1930s. Myself, you know, my dad was born in the middle of that. Some people's dads, grandparents were born on that, and we've been taught, you know, money doesn't grow on trees, and we've been taught these types of things. And I think a challenge of of um, of that is that many people have been taught that that's not powerful teaching, but they haven't been given an alternative. So it's like, well, okay, great. I don't need to believe that, but where do I go? And so a lot of people have been, you know, told not to believe in those types of things, but then there's been no powerful alternative. So the mule essentially is basically rewarded for the units of effort. If you get a man with a mule, you get to hire him to come out, and he's going to, you know, work for 8 hours in a day, and they're going to eventually get the work done. Whereas a magician, you actually want to celebrate that. And if a mule gets the job done too quickly, many times let's just put it in a common perspective, if you get your work done too quickly at a job where you're an employee, and many times employees, especially those paid by the hour, have entered into a contractual mule relationship with their employer. I won't get this done too efficiently nor too inefficiently. If I get it done too efficiently, I upset the apple cart for the rest of the employees, because then I make it difficult to manage the collective. And if I get it done too inefficiently, then I'm an example that people can get away with being lazy. So, you know, mules tend to be managed to the middle. No one wants them to be too poor financially or in competence, both in their contribution and to the reception, but nobody wants them to be too rewarded or too effective either. Otherwise, they draw attention to the fact that you know, all people contribute equally. And you know, being in the U.S., you know, part of our founding document says that, you know, I believe that all men are created equal, and that may or may not be true. I find that difficult to believe, because I wasn't created as tall as, you know, some people playing professional basketball. So I would never have an equal opportunity to be a professional basketball center, let's say, no matter how well I became at dribbling, or no matter how well I could shoot, you know, to play that defensive center position. Satin's just not there for me. And everyone that, you know, arrives on a football team may aspire to be the quarterback, but if you're, you know, 410 pounds and solid as a rock, not overweight, but if you're 410 pounds and only like 6'3", very likely you're going to be better on the offensive or defensive line as a nose guard or a center, as opposed to the quarterback, which is the aspirational. So I believe all people, you know, are created divinely and powerfully, but I don't know that we're all created equal. But the mule wants to promulgate that effect that, you know, we all are in this equal middle. And if somebody's getting rewarded too little, well, that's a challenge. Somebody's getting rewarded too much. That's a challenge, because we're all here. We're in this together, and we're all pulling the plow. And here again, this is part of my Christian upbringing. The Bible actually brings up a very important piece of wisdom when it says, do not be unequally yoked. So if two mules are in a yoke together, you don't want one that's super fast and one that's super slow, you know, because then they're going to have trouble coordinating their efforts. And so that's why, your surroundings are really beneficial for you, because if you're surrounding yourself with people who are promoting that you, back to the 4 F's, are putting finances above all other things and letting, the other areas of your life struggle, then you might find yourself, becoming less of a woven person. You might find your weave to be a little bit more at risk, but your finances might skyrocket. But then if you put yourself in a group that, let's just say, places faith above finances and thinks that they are counterproductive, then you might find yourself, being more, grounded in your heart's thinking, but being more irresponsible for your self-provision and looking for others to provide for you. There's probably not a complimentary statement toward this demographic, but they call it woke but broke. And the other would be, rich but SOB, so, neither of those, in my opinion, neither of those disconnected extremes are necessarily the most beneficial. It's keeping that weave together that's important, not celebrating one to the exclusion of the other. Back to the mule versus the magician. The magician is rewarded for the, change in contribution, and not to get into a not to get in an argument about, class warfare right now, but people are, some people lament, let's just say, the wealth and riches of someone like Jeff Bezos right now. But during this time, a lot of people are benefiting from his risk and ingenuity over the years, and it's providing them with food and access to things that they couldn't go out and get. And so I'm not going to make an argument as to whether he's over rewarded or under rewarded or equivalently rewarded to his contribution. But the truth of the matter is, Sati, and I know I can speak for myself, maybe I can speak for you, and everybody else will let speak for themselves, but Jeff Bezos has created more toward the advancement of the human experience than you or I have, by the number of people and the number of things that he's influenced. And so, if I want to be rewarded to that degree, then I need to create more magic. The things that he's created is magic. How you can order anything from anywhere in the world. It shows up on your doorstep in 2 days, where you can take, very likely this call might be using some of the, cloud servers that Amazon took the risk to hire engineers and design and build to make happen. And so, a magician is rewarded and sees the reward as a reflection of his or her contribution in terms of the getting of things done. So mule rewarded for what they do, magician rewarded for what they're getting done. And if a magician for some reason or another isn't able to get anything done, he doesn't have those hours to fall back on. So I think that's a very beneficial thing. It's not necessarily that a magician's going to be rewarded more handsomely. In fact, many of them, as they're developing their magic, might go through periods of sacrifice. But then once they begin to refine their magic and start hitting those moments where that magic is both effective and efficient, they start receiving the rewards of those. And I think that's beneficial for both, both the mule and the magician to look at and to ask themselves, like, what do they aspire to be? Magicians might be rewarded quite a lot less in the outset of their development of their magic, but once their magic starts to mature and be more highly sought out, they could likely see the upside of what they do be a lot higher.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. In this few minutes we have left, I'd love to hear what's in your heart that you would love to share with my friends and our friends here gathered.
I think that now is a great time. We talked about that when you develop the 4Fs in a combined manner and you develop that foundation powerfully, you start trusting yourselves more as a steward of time, money, decisions, contribution, responsibility, a lot of things. And I think this might sound like a paradox, but I think it's a time for those in business to seek to distance themselves from the masses in their business contributions and collections, but then align with the masses in terms of their, connection to humanity. Sometimes it's easier if you're a magician to go out and rather than teach, everybody at that moment how to do magic, to go do magic, but then use it to improve the entire world around you, in ways that you see fit, rather than spending those rewards frivolously. So I do think there's going to be, and I actually celebrate this, a greater dispersion between the financial rewards in business between the haves and the have-nots over the years and months coming. And I think that's just a sign of people's greater, people who've chosen to be magicians in some way or lean that way. That might not be binary. I think this is a sign of people's preparation for a time like this, and how much they've prepared. I think there are four currencies that are being tested right now as to what your preparation has been, probably many more, but I'll hit on four. One is just the money that you've saved. If you've saved a lot of money, then I think you're in a much better position right now to make choices less out of fear. The second is the value you've been, known to create. If people know that what you have has value, you're going to be more sought out than people who have been providing what I would call a minimum viable product. And the distinction between those still keeping client bases and people who provided a maximum available value in their product, I think that that's going to, those people are going to be more sought out when they have an opportunity to make a choice. The fourth is our goodwill that we've built. One of the reasons that if you're listening to me and you've never heard my voice before, one of the reasons that you are doing that is because Satya and I spent time building value with each other. So we're bringing, you this. And so, the benefit to me is that, I get to share my thoughts, and the benefit to Satya is that in some way he finds these valuable as part of his mass collective of wisdom he's been sharing right now with his community. And so, we both get to benefit, but only because we built trust and goodwill earlier with each other. And then finally, just that level of commitment, there's going to be a great deal of rewards that are available for people whose persistence outlasts the persistence of others. And those who fall into a victim status quickly, rather than searching for a way. Man, I know I have so many Christian references, but when I'm around Satya and I want to, talk about deeper spiritual things, and those are my point of reference. But Christ said at one point, "Seek and you shall find." And I think that that's just as true right now as people are seeking. That was for, to a great degree, people who were looking for an alternative to the way that they were living, perhaps in a little bit more limited context, but maybe not. Maybe it was more expensive context and it's just been taught in recent years as more limited. But in our current context of the business climate, seek and you shall find is a really, really, if you're not seeking, you're not going to find an alternative. I doubt that in this time of fear versus faith or fear versus love, that out of the blue of an uninspired mind, many people are just going to be hit with an idea. But if you're journaling frequently and asking yourself, how can I find an alternative? Where is the alternative? Where is the unbeaten path? Where is the place that few would look for an alternative that it exists? Where can I find peace in my pursuit, and where can I find fulfillment in my pursuit? If you're seeking that, likely you're going to be much more likely to find it than if you're not looking for it and just stumbling across it at all. And so I think that there is going to be a greater dispersion in the business arena. But because I think that that's moving away from fear into love, my prayer is, Satya, and I really think that it's true, that those people who have a greater sense of reward during this time are going, you mentioned compassion early on, are going to have a greater sense of compassion and are going to use the rewards of their magic, not just to further enrich themselves, but realize that as that faith, family, fitness, and finance applies not only on an individual level, but as a collective, that if the planet doesn't do well, we don't do well who live here. If our if our people we come in contact with don't in some way do well, then we're not going to do well who live here. And I think that while they might do better in terms of the direction of those rewards and the immediate collection of those rewards, I think that their stewardship, and it's my prayer that their stewardship is much more responsible than maybe in the past. And so while rewards might begin to be directed more toward one group of people, I'm praying and hopeful that that group of people will be more responsible and look for that as an opportunity for stewardship, a wise stewardship, rather than an opportunity to have that be in some way a support of just greed. So
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Kevin, the richness and the depth of where you come from has made and continues to make such an impression and opens me and helps me flower into the best I can be as a business being. And I want to thank you for making a difference. And everyone who's listening, thank you so much. And, you know, how can folks, friends find out about you and what you do?
you know, I'm not actually doing a lot in business right now, except for you know, occasionally I'm going a lot more inward. I think you have me personally tagged on this video.
Yes.
Feel free to follow me on Facebook. I put out random, you know, sometimes very, very eloquent and sometimes very, very juvenile posts there from time to time, invite people to be clients. I don't have a gateway drug to becoming a Kevin Nations client right now because I'm working more with people like you, Satyan. But I would love if people came there and, you know, benefited from the share. And if, as they say in the Christian faith, if as the Holy Spirit moves, you ever felt like reaching out and talking about working together, do that. I tend to try to my best to talk to whomever reaches out through like Facebook chat or whatever, regardless if there's an opportunity to work together or not. I appreciate that. And I won't give you feedback about your business because I think that a diagnosis or prescription that one's made without a powerful diagnosis is malpractice. So I won't do that. But, you know, I can encourage you or tell you if we'd be a good fit to work together. And I very much want to encourage everybody to seek to be the best versions of themselves. And Satyan, thanks for your kind words. Very humbling. And I'm very grateful because I've had a lot of people to look to, including you. And I just have to tell you that more so than in the past, and I don't know if you're having more people on or I'm just being more aware of it, but the collective of people, and I'm grateful to be a part of it, but the collective of people that you've had on your videos, I've watched so many of them recently and been incredibly benefited. So grateful to be a part of them. But man, just as a viewer, thank you for what you're doing to not only share your wisdom, but to kind of step aside and be the cheerleader and the champion of so many great voices that I would have never heard of. The breadth of your connections is in many ways unparalleled. And so I'm just grateful for, you know, you bring voices on from martial arts to, you know, Eastern religion to my, you know, fundamental Christian background tied in, woven into business to, you know, all of these different areas. And it's interesting because while their direction of share is so diverse, if you rewind back, like it all synergizes together and it's just so beautiful. So I think that's an awesome observation, and seeing all of them come because you are connected with them, I think is just a testament to you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much, everyone who came today to listen and to absorb. Thank you so much. All my love, all my hugs and blessings. Kevin, much love to you, and we'll circle around soon. Thank you for your service. Okay.
Thanks, Satya.